Upcock, we're going to rank Premier League seasons from worst to best. Now, it's been quite a boring year. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say I've been thrilled start to finish. The three that went up have all come back down, and Liverpool had it wrapped up from September. So there's not been a load of excitement really all the way through. It's only a Europa race at end that got a bit interesting. But nevertheless, let's have a look at the tiers. We're going to start top to bottom for once. Guets, top. Sa, which means slightly above average. And then Spa, slightly below average. Honking, and Man United. Yeah, I mean, come on. I just can't even get past this to start with. We've got to address this straight away. Man United. The Manchester United, one of two biggest clubs in the world, them and Real Madrid, biggest club in this country. From an outsider's perspective, I've got no affiliation to Man United at all. They are comfortably the biggest club in this country. Fan base-wise, everything. They are a colossus. And they finished 15th. It's the lowest I've ever seen them finish in my life. I think it's the worst league finish in about 50-odd years. Like, since they were actually relegated, it's 70s. Man United have never been this crap. They showed a little bit of something against Villa on last day. But that's 25 games too late. They started quite well. They got to 30 points fairly quickly, so they were safe early doors, which is a good job. But they finished on 42 points. That's exactly half of Liverpool's. They are half as good as Liverpool are. That's to win league. How far are they off like Champions League, for example? 24 points of Champions League. They're 23 points behind Nottingham Forest. They finished below Burton about 6-7 years ago. What are we doing here? I'm still waiting for Jim Ratcliffe to sack another 200 members of staff, because obviously it's their fault that they're in such a mess. And financial burden that Man United are going to have from not being in any form of Europe at all must have an hit on them. Going into next season, I don't see much of a change. They'll be slightly higher than what they are now in 15th. But I wouldn't even say it's a given that they break top half, Man U. They are terrible. They finished 15th for a reason. And in terms of like pre-season expectation, nobody had them realistically challenging for anything. Like, nobody thought they were going to challenge for the league, did they? But I think a lot still thought, oh, Amorim, this coach, but what can he do with these sort of players? But they're all numpties, aren't they? Majority of them that Man United have got. It's Bruno surrounded by Muppet Show. But for Man United to finish 24 points away from Europe, never mind winning anything, 24 points off Europe is mental. There is no one, probably in this country, that has had a worse season than Man United. Expectations to reality. Now, there are some obvious ones as well, like Tottenham, for example. Tottenham absolutely stink this year. They've won a trophy, and that's all that history is going to remember, because a lot of people don't know, early 90s, Tottenham were battling relegation a few of them years anyway. Tottenham haven't always been this massive club. League finish-wise, that is. They've always had fan base there, but like league finish-wise, this is not too far from what they were when the Premier League first started, early 90s anyway. But they've finished 17th, which is nuts. They've finished with the highest amount of losses in a league ever to still stay up. 22 losses. More than half the games this season they've lost. And they've won a trophy. They're in Champions League. And they've survived fourth bottom. Obviously, they finished below Man United. But Man United are Man United. And Tottenham just aren't. So that's my reason for the change in tiers. Like I say, only thing that matters is that they've won a trophy. But that's Europa League campaign. And like their actual Premier League campaign, which is what I'm ranking these on mainly, it's been crap. And also, even if you take into account the season that Tottenham have had, you could probably say they're up here just because they've won something. But the league position's mental. I've got to put them down there. And then another one that I've got in honking, I've got to have Southampton in here. Yes, they've been relegated, and I feel like it's a borderline impossible job to stay up now for some championship sides. But they finished on 12 points. They've had 2 wins in 38 games. They were honestly challenging Derby's record for worst side ever until the last couple of weeks. There's ways to go down, and this one's embarrassing. I'm not going to go too harsh on them because I never thought they'd stood a chance anyway. I had them bottoming in Prem predictions. They come up with Russell Martin, who were trying to play total football with a bunch of idiots compared to Premier League players. So it's always a very tough ask. But 12 points is 12 points, so I just can't get past that. They've had a very, very crap year, Southampton have, same as Spurs. Moving up into the SPA, which is slightly below average, I have got Ipswich and Leicester. We'll put them 2 in first. Again, they've both been relegated, same as Southampton, but they had like a bit of an attempt at it. They got to, what, at least they got 20 points both from Ipswich finished on 22 and Leicester finished on 25. It's still embarrassing. They've still been relegated, but again, I think it's way too harsh and too naive to look at the championship teams that are coming up and expect them to survive anyway. Like, we'll see it more with next season and season afterwards, just how difficult it is, and then people might start taking a bit more notice of it. So I thought Ipswich should survive just based on McKenna and the amount of money that they spent, but ultimately they're still 150 million quid off, which there's not a lot they can do really, so it's slightly below average for both of them, I'd say. I've got a couple more in here though, like West Ham. Obviously West Ham have finished 14th, so league position wise it's not ended up being end at world, but for quite a bit of this season, West Ham and Wolves especially were two sides that the bottom three were looking at. And Wolves you can sort of expect, like Everton you'd almost expect to be down there as well in recent years. Maybe Forest, honestly, before the season started. But West Ham, given like the Europe success that they've had recently, the big sales that they've had off Rice, they've got like Jared Bowen and some very good players. It's tough. I expected more from him. I think a lot of people did. It's not been absolutely atrocious to have him down here. It don't warrant that position. But they have been below average on what you'd expect from West Ham, let's be honest. And I'm not going to lie to you, I would say the same about Brighton, which is nuts considering that Brighton have finished 8th. But this has been a very, very poor league this season. When you look at the teams, the bigger sides in this division where you'd expect them to normally be, this was the time for a smaller side, it's fair to say, in Premier League in Brighton, to really take advantage of that and try and snag Europe a little bit like Forest have done. Like teams that you typically see in and around top 6, 7 that are fighting for Europe all the time. Man United and Tottenham have been in a relegation battle, borderline, for the majority of this season. Like I just said about West Ham, they've been in Europe a couple of times last few years. They're in 14th. It were a chance for someone like Brighton, best at rest sort of vibe, to really have a go at getting in there. And they finished 8th, and if they'd have got a little bit luckier with the European placements, they would have got in there. The 4 points of Forest, which in end at world, really, but I still think they should have finished in front of them, realistically, with the squad that they've both got and the expectations for both sides. I expected Brighton to be in Europe, really, or to be challenging for it all the way to end when you look at where Man United, Tottenham, West Ham all are in the league. So again, it's not end at world, and ultimately it's a good season. Brighton finishing 8th, it's nuts. When you take a step back and deep it, really, Brighton 8th, slightly below average, is mental. But I did think they could have offered a little bit more start middle periods at season, because they ended quite well, and if they'd have started with same sort of rhythm, they'd have been fine. But it's slightly below average, I think, for Brighton. And then I would partner this, because I've still got a couple more. Man City, I think that goes without saying. You always expect them to finish, well, first, realistically. They have won 4 in a row before this. But you can't be too harsh on a side that have finished 3rd, and it's the joint lowest position under Pep. How long's he been here now? Like 7, 8 years? And 3rd is the joint lowest position. The standard at Man City with Pep are so ridiculously high that 3rd could honestly be seen as like a really poor season for him. And the fact that they've won nothing as well, like, you can't get away from that, a treble-winning team of a year, to then come into this week absolutely niche. But I think, in grand scheme of things, the majority of people before the season started had Man City or Arsenal as your two sides that were going to properly go for it. Not many people outside of Liverpool would have said that Liverpool would win the league. So, the fact that they finished 3rd and below Arsenal, I would say is below average for Man City standards. Well, it is below average for Man City standards. Their average is 1st, realistically. But these boys aren't safe either. These aren't safe either. I'm sticking Arsenal in the same category, slightly below average. Regardless of the fact that they finished 2nd, Arsenal, which is, again, it's a good season. They've done it a couple of times in a row now. 74 points is a very low tally for 2nd place. That is really low. Mainly by their own standards again, because last year they finished 2nd as well, but they got 89 points. That had won them league this season comfortably. To drop off 15 points in space of a year and win nothing at the same time, it's a bad season, really, for Arsenal, that. It's only because these 3 are so much worse that I'm not putting Arsenal in the same sort of category as these boys, because they've been, like, horrendous. But it's definitely a bad season for Arsenal, this. 2nd, which, obviously fair enough, but a 15-point drop-off from last season, getting to semis and then not really showing up against PSG. They never really did out, did they? Especially after beating Real Madrid round before, and they look really good. No in FA Cup, no in Carabao. So they've come away with another trophyless season, and it's just the never-ending project. Do you know what I mean? With Arsenal. Obviously, they need a striker, and next season, their ambitions could be a little bit higher, you'd think, if they do get a striker in and tweak with certain things here and there. Because they're not far off being a proper top dog. But for right here and now in this season, that is a below average season, definitely for Arsenal standards. Right, moving up, slightly above average. I've got Wolves. I'm going to put them in nice and early because they could have got in here. But at the same time, Wolves, the majority of people, again, would have probably had Wolves bottom 5, 6-ish. They are one of the weakest out of big 17 in Premier League now. Wolves are definitely one of the weakest sides. But they got 42 points. That will keep you up more or less every year in history, 42 points. It's 17 in front of Leicester. They were more than fine at end of things. Obviously, when they lose Cunha, it could alter them a little bit. But at the same time, I think they've played better without him for most part when I've seen Wolves, especially towards end of season. It looks like they've finally replaced Callum as well. They've struggled with that defensive side, and they've been terribly bad defensively. But I feel like that's sort of changing a little bit now. They're getting a little bit more solid defensively. There's going to be bids in for Nouri as well, a very good player. But it's not a below average season. I'd say it's just smack in middle of what you'd probably expect from Wolves, which is in and around bottom 5, and that's exactly where they've been. But I will have them in slightly above average because they finished above a Europa League finalist and level on points with other one. So in grand scheme of things, not that bad, is it, for Wolves? I have also got Everton in here. Now, second half of season since David Moyes has come in, they've got 30-odd points. So if he'd have took charge of full thing, they'd have got 60-odd, which would have had them in 9th above like Bournemouth, Brentford, Fulham, who people rave about having quite good seasons by their own standards. Everton have gone from finishing 4th, 5th bottom for the last, 3 years now with Lampard, Dyche. The priority has just been to survive. We effectively same crop of players. Moyes hasn't brought anybody of his own in yet, really. He's not had a summer yet. Let's see what he does this time and what they can do next year. But Moyes is built for this club. He just is. He is an Everton man through and through, innit? And second half of the season, they've properly pulled away to definitely be an above-average season for Everton standards in recent history. Obviously, Moyes, when he gets a grip on him, who knows, he might have him in Europe again consistently like he did when he was there first time. But Everton, overall, half-decent season, that. I'd be impressed. If I were an Everton fan, I'd be looking upwards. I'd be quite happy. And I'm going to stick all 3 of these in here at once. Bournemouth, Brentford, and Fulham. Again, 3 smaller sides in this division that have all finished 9th, 10th, and 11th. None of them have ended up getting Europe, and they're all winning 2 points for each other. But these are sides that people just look at names, like club names, and immediately think, you're getting relegated straight away. Just because there's so much smaller sides in the league, you think, Bournemouth, they're going down. Brentford, yeah, tiny club, no chance. Consistently, they're always safe, but they've really kicked on, these 3, I think, this season, in terms of like the play style. And the players that they're bringing in now, and some of the players that they've been able to keep over years, very impressive. And they're never in danger of going down, these sides, are they now, these 3? They've really put a stamp on it this time, I think, to become the new Palace, for example. A side that's always in and around mid-table. I don't know where these 3 can improve realistically to take that next step and get into Europe. You know, like Brighton did that time. I don't know where these 3 can really take that step unless they make humongous sales like Brighton have done and reinvest it across a full squad, more or less. But they offer so much more than majority of sides below them, which is really impressive. I think next season it'll be the same thing again. These 3 in and around same positions, just not good enough, but definitely be safe. If you ask a fan from any of these 3 teams, would you take mid-table in Premier League? They would all stamp your hand off right now, every season for the rest of the time. So, above average season for all 3 of them, I think. And then my final one that I've got in here is Chelsea. I'm still not actually convinced they're that good. Which is nuts, really, because they've ended up finishing 4th, which by Chelsea's own ambitions as a club, Chelsea's ambition is always to win everything, innit? And towards the end of the season especially, some of the players have been picking up and had real standout seasons, like Cucurella, for example. I don't like him. Sideshow Bob looking ass. But still had a very good year. They've got Champions League, and yeah, they've obviously not won all. They've not won any at Cups or Premier League. They might win Conference League, you'd expect them to. It's slightly above average for pre-season expectation, I would say, from my perspective. I can't have them in here. Do you know what I mean? I can't have them on the same table as Man City and Arsenal, who people thought had challenged for the league, when they've ended up in same positions, really, as Chelsea have. They've all got Champions League and they've won now, really. And I'm going to change them at last second, mainly because of where I put Tottenham. I'm going to put Palace in Sar, because I were taking into account Crystal Palace's FA Cup win, which ain't fair, because then I've got Tottenham down there. You know what? I'm gonna keep Tottenham there. You know what? I don't care. I'm bringing Palace. You know what? I'm putting Palace in top. And yeah, at the same time, I'm gonna leave Tottenham down there. They finished 17th. Regardless of how they've won something, and that's all that matters. I'm not bothered. The actual season as a whole has been terrible, so I'm keeping Tottenham there, and I'm putting Palace in top. In fact, I'm going one further. I'm putting Palace in guts. It's the first trophy ever. It's the first ever major trophy. They're going to go around Europe. They bet Man City in a final. That is a great year as far as Palace are concerned. Sorry, I just had to get it off my chest. I'm keeping Palace in guts, not bothered. For top, I have got Newcastle, who again have qualified for Champions League. They finished 5th. They only got in on goal difference of Aston Villa. And at one point, they did look like they were going to finish 2nd, honestly. When Arsenal kept dropping points and Newcastle looked really good in certain periods, I thought Newcastle could have pipped into 2nd. Not that it mean anything, realistically, because they're both going to be in Champions League. But Newcastle are really, really good. I don't think they're too far away from being a serious contender, honestly. With the core of that squad and some of the players they've got, Spiner, it's really good. They're not a million miles off. I really like them. They've had a good year. And again, it's Newcastle are a massive club, don't get me wrong, but they're not Man United and Tottenham and these boys, do you know what I mean? So for Newcastle to have taken advantage of their season being that poor and got into Europe, into Champions League as well, not just Europe, to get into Champions League, that's massive. In being able to keep some of the players as well, like an Isaac or a Tonali or a Bruno, Champions League is so important to keeping them. I think they've had a top season. And they won something as well. Like, I forgot about that. They've obviously won a trophy. Newcastle have had a great year. And then another obvious one, I've got Villa in top as well. They had a good go at it. in Champions League as well, and they've ended up finishing 6th. So, like I just said about Newcastle, Villa have narrowly missed out on Champions League by goal difference, but they're still going into Europa, and with Emery in charge, you'd think they're going to be one of heavy favourites for it anyway. And to obviously manage the season like they have done, because when Newcastle went straight into Champions League, the season for Premier League took a hit, obviously, because you've got to manage all these extra games with a squad that's not quite built for it yet, travel all these extra miles, the tiredness will kick in and fatigue. Villa dealt with it very, very well. To still finish 6th is seriously good going, because I thought they'd be a little bit lower than that. No Champions League, but no problem as far as I'm concerned. I think they've had a great year, Villa have. Going back into Europa League, something they can probably win, and they've snagged Europe while still having a good going Champions League this year. Very good. And at the same time, if it weren't for a ridiculous decision against Man United, I know they ended up losing 2-0 anyway, but if officials weren't absolutely horrendously dogshit in this country, then Villa would have been 1-0 up away at Man U. So, no, they could have ended up in Champions League, and they might have to sell the best players because of some stupid decision from a ref. But still, top year for Villa. And then joining Palace in the guts, I've got Forest, which some people might... I think if this were to go to general public and you all had a go at this, I think the majority would put them probably in top because of the way that they ended up falling out at Champions League. They were third for a lot of year and ended up finishing in conference, of all things, which is quite upsetting for him. But at the same time, not one person on this planet, even the most biased Forest fan to ever walk this earth, would not have said at the start of this season, I think Forest are going to get in Europe. I think a lot of them would have said, like, slightly better than last year. They'd have finished either 4th bottom, but still definitely bottom half. So for them to finish 7th, Forest, and got Europe for the first time since 90s, that is an unreal season. Nuno is a mint manager. And I honestly think he could go to almost any club on this list and probably do the same thing with him. He's such a good gaffer. So yeah, they ended up failing. Really, when you change your objectives and your ambitions as season's going on, their ambition were Champions League until the last, 5 games, weren't it? Taking into account all context, these finished 4th bottom last year, and they've got 7th this time. That is a humongous turnaround, and Forest are definitely a go at this year. And so are Liverpool. Like, they've won league. What else do you want? They've won title. It's Arne Slot's first year. Bob on, mate. What else is there to say? But that's that. Here's to same again next year, hopefully a little bit more exciting. Love you all. Keys, thank you as always. Make sure you like, subscribe if you do enjoy it. Helps me out a lot. I hope there's a little bit more going on at both ends next year. I doubt it at bottom end, but top end, who knows. But thank you as always. Love you all and say in a bit. Goodbye.
I say I'm a man, yes, I'm a mucker. I think of me saying as a right good looker. I say up that. Show us bit it.